The name of today is Disrupt, and I think a lot of people in this room, I imagine, started on the front line, and the title of this session is Stories from the Front Line. And I think in other conferences, we often hear talk of what it's like for agents, customer-facing colleagues, what it's like for team leaders. I'm really pleased with the makeup of the panel that we're actually going to hear those true stories, which is great for the name. So I'm going to take a seat and shut up. And if I could just ask the panel to introduce themselves.
Hey, I'm Dan Fretwell. I am the Quality Assurance Manager and Training Lead at the Cotswold company.
Hi, I'm Kez. I work in the Customer Relations Centre in Nespresso.
I'm Stephen Yap. I'm the Research Director at CCMA.
I'm Nick Wingrove, working for GENESYS, running the solution consultants across Europe, Middle East and Africa.
And I'm Parveen, Jamal, Team Leader at DDC Outsourcing.
So put your hands together and say thank you very much for the panel. We're all very nervous, so be gentle, please. So I want to kick off with Stephen, and you've been doing some, with the CCMA and backing of Sabia, you've done a load of research on the front line. Give us some of the headlines to kick us off.
Yes, so I want to start by making a point that I think it's a fair point. We are all living in a time where our resilience is being challenged possibly more than ever than we've ever experienced in our entire lifetimes. And that goes for us collectively as a nation. It goes for us each as individuals. We went straight from a global pandemic into a time of intense political and economic upheaval. And that's the time we're living in right now, and there's no end in sight. What does that mean? It means that there's a massive amount of uncertainty out there. It means that there's a massive amount of anxiety out there. And that is reflected in what we're seeing in contact centers, because our customers, our consumers, are more anxious than ever before. They're more in need of reassurance than ever before, and we see that. We see that in the contact center because the contact center, if you like, is a barometer, it's a bellwether of the mood of the nation. It's a litmus test of what's going on in the outside world. I know Parveen works in energy, and I think energy is a really good example of this. If you think about what's happened in the energy industry, 3 years ago, who really looked at their energy bills? Who really studied the unit rates? I think a lot of us do now, and a lot of us are a lot more educated. And when we talk to our energy companies, we're probably a lot more demanding of our energy companies than we were 3 years ago. So the energy costs, as we all know, went up last year, and they're going up again in April. So we all have to stay on top of what's going on. And for a lot of people now, because of what's happening with rising costs, the difference between your direct debit staying the same or going up, the difference between your energy costs going up or staying the same could be the difference between you making the ends meet this month or not. So it's so much more urgent. It's so much more important than ever before. So that's just one example from one particular sector, but the stakes are so much higher. And in a world where we're just that more anxious to begin with, that means that the level of complexity, the level of emotion that we're dealing with in the contact center is higher than ever before. This is also further exacerbated, if you like, by the fact that we've been doing such a really good job of taking away the simple stuff, automating the simple stuff, getting people to self-serve the simple stuff. So what I'm seeing is there is almost a polarization going on where more and more the normalization of self-serve is rapidly growing for the simple queries. But actually what I'm also seeing at the same time is for the more complex stuff, where there's more at stake, when you're talking about a refund, when you're talking about a query with your invoice, when you're talking about a warranty claim, there's actually a reversion where people are going back to and wanting to go back to talking to people, wanting to go back to assisted channels like phone and voice. What does that mean for the people on the front line? It means that more and more they're dealing with difficult conversations. It means that they have less simple conversations, and actually, the simple conversations are a way for you to take a break. You might have a series of hard, challenging conversations, you have a few easy ones. You could do those easy ones almost as a way to catch your breath and recharge. But more and more, you don't get those simple conversations, and you just get a long, more endless, continuous stream of hard conversations. And there's one really key finding from the research we've just launched with between the CCMA and Sabio. So you've heard a lot about concepts like community, identity, and control, and all of those are incredibly powerful and really important ways to look at your structures and culture. What the research shows is, out of almost everything, the one thing that makes the biggest difference is, for an agent, is taking a break. And it's almost so simple, isn't it? It's almost so simple. But we looked at people who reported signs of work stress and burnout, and we looked at people who didn't. And by the way, our survey shows that more than half of people on the front line report at least one symptom. 53% of people we surveyed who work on the front line in contact centres say they have at least one symptom. That could be some symptom of physical and mental health. It could be problem sleeping at night. It could be going home feeling drained at the end of every working day. 53%. The biggest difference between those who report those symptoms and those who do not is the ability to take breaks. But that's getting harder because the conversations are getting harder, because the simple stuff is going away and doesn't allow people to take those breaks. So I think everything that we've been talking about today in terms of understanding the experience of the people on the front line and really focusing on the experience of the people on the front line is so important, and it's not optional. And we, as much as we have been focusing and investing in customer experience, we need to be focusing on the colleague experience.
I think it's fascinating. And Parveen, as an excellent team leader who cares for your people, is what Stephen's saying forefront of your mind about how do you look after your team?
So I think first of all, Steve's touched on how challenging it is at the minute, both for customers and for call centre staff. And the type of things that I would do to support my staff is, if they've had a really difficult conversation, we give them some reset time, so they can, take 5 minutes, 10 minutes to actually reset their mind to then take their next chat, with an open mind and be positive. The other things that we've got in place is we have team huddles on a daily basis, so there's communication. We have sharing of best practice to make sure that we have team chats, so everybody can actually speak to each other. Communication is key as well. Like Steve said, lots of things are changing, price increases, etc. And I need to make sure that my team know exactly what's happening so that they can service our customers better.
I think it's fascinating as well, because from what you're saying, Stephen, we're in a situation where consumers are feeling more vulnerable or they're more under pressure, but they're probably talking to our frontline team members who are equally the same.
Yeah.
Kez, how are you managing your teams? What are some of the things that you're doing? Does this ring true for you?
So it is a little bit different for me. Some of the things that Stephen said again, some of the results from the survey, I think I saw that survey as well in the results, where 53% of people, based on, for example, 30 people in your team, are actually asking for support with whether it's mental health or physical health, some sort of well-being health support that they would like to get from work. And for me, it's just to, as a team leader, it's just having that knowledge of what are the things that are available to me, to be able to then direct them to those different resources and utilize the tool that I would have. So based on, for example, 30 people, 53%, you're probably looking about 16 people in your team that need more attention, they need more check-ins, they need more support, and some of the tools that I have utilized already is employee assistance program, occupational health, having obviously regular check-ins. Obviously I'm only one person as a team leader covering obviously such a big team, so it can be challenging. I think for us it's just having the knowledge and actually realizing that we are not an experts in being able to carry out those counseling sessions to them, but just direct them to those resources and utilize those tools that are available can be really, really crucial to actually, help them to realize that you care about them. And something that you said, Parveen, is that it's that sense of belonging in the team, just building a positive environment can also help, and actually having them informed and giving them the right information and communication, just having those team meetings in the morning meetings, or just afternoons, or just daily catch-ups to keep them informed what's actually happening, what information they need to know, whether it's a particular obviously crisis or an issue that you need to deal with, solve different problems, some of the different, you need to adjust your day and prioritize in a different way. All of those pressures they basically keep taking on with all of those internal factors that keep putting more and more pressures into that health and well-being, as well as external pressures that you've already mentioned, Stephen. It is really hard. And then I think that the role of the team leader nowadays is much harder than it's ever been before.
Because I think as well, Stephen, you were mentioning before that it's, to Kez's point, a team leader's role, they can either assist with energy or they can deplete it. But you are also drained yourself from doing the role. What else has the research said?
I think the research doesn't need to tell me this, but it does occur to me the team leader has the hardest job of the contact centre. The team leader's job is to look after anywhere from 10 to 30 people and be personally responsible for the welfare of those individuals, and many team leaders at the same time still got their own tasks to do. They're still handling escalations. It's an incredibly difficult job, and the research poses a question more than it offers an answer. Actually poses a couple of questions. Who's actually supporting the team leaders? So who's helping with the well-being of the team leaders, number one. And number two is, where do we draw the line? So you made the point, Kez, we're not counsellors. Our mental health first aid personnel have probably received a couple of days of training. They're probably volunteers and they're doing it because they want to help. But they're not professional counsellors. And I don't have the answers, but I think it's a question that more and more we're going to be asking ourselves is, we know that most challenges with well-being, with mental health, do originate outside of the work environment, but work has a huge role to play in either helping people to cope and manage, or the opposite, it can help to exacerbate, or it can contribute to exacerbating pre-existing issues. And we have a responsibility, we have a duty of care to help the people who are suffering, but is there a line that must be drawn, because ultimately we're not doctors?
We were kind of hoping you did have the answers, to be honest. Now, Dan, Stephen there mentioned support, and when you look at the area you're responsible for, quality and training, how have you seen that change on the front line? What kind of different demands or what kind of things are you looking at the moment?
Well, there's definitely been an uptick in requests for resilience training, I think. So just requests for better training around how can I help the customer in this situation where they're quite angry, as you'd expect in certain situations. What essentially the question is what do you have to offer me to be able to help in this situation? And I think that's a great position to be in, because it gives the opportunity to be able to help the advisors and therefore also help the customers. So I'm in the fortunate position where I look after the training and quality assurance program. So I can kind of lean on both when I need to. So I can sort of train out the soft skills or the more difficult situation skills or resolution skills. And then I also have the power bestowed upon me to also see, okay, like how well are they actually bringing that to the table? How well are they using these skills to help the customer? So it's basically, I see it as that kind of journey where kind of, okay, we need to train this out, and then let's train it out, and then let's look at the end product. So I can kind of have that first-hand experience of seeing how well it landed. But also I get to hear what the customers are saying, and I think, Stephen, you mentioned a good point where it is a very good litmus test as to how the nation is doing. And so I think just ensuring that we're listening to customers, we're listening to how agents are resolving these issues, and most importantly, we're listening to where those knowledge gaps are in terms of skill sets to try and work around these difficult conversations and angry customers. I think the great opportunity for training is that we can provide support to the frontline, so we can provide support to agents, and we can actually also, with QA as well, we can monitor, okay, maybe over time they're dropping in this area, so is there something going on at home? How are they doing? Is there anything? Obviously we can observe the metrics and sort of see, okay, well normally they're around 80%, but they've dropped over the, they're dropping, how are they doing, what's their well-being like? So so there's lots of different opportunities around training and QA to really support frontline agents, and hopefully I think we're doing a reasonable job at it. Good job.
And I think what's really interesting there is that if we're recognising that the cognitive load is being increased, then the interventions, not just from team leaders, but from support functions, you have a real responsibility to make sure that that is a progressive intervention, because you don't want to be on the phones taking these more complex kind of challenges, then to go, right, now you've got a QA feedback, and for that to feel punitive, it's kind of these interventions from QA, from training, have to be progressive and helpful and kind of ease that load. Now, Nick, it's interesting that one of the things Stephen said there was at the outset, we kind of got a break on the more transactional stuff. Yeah. And that in itself is disruptive, because I know from the industry's point of view, we'd say, don't worry, it's not, come and join the contact center world. You're not going to be on a production line, you're going to be a complex problem solver. And we've said that this is a great thing, that we're going to go out in the outer world and say, come to our industry and be a complex problem solver. But if that's all you're doing, and we're using technology to reduce those transactional kind of interactions, we're creating a slightly different problem. How does that factor into your world when you're thinking about the technology that supports both your customers and employees?
Yeah. So yeah, and it adds on to what you were talking about, Daniel, in terms of training and coaching and mentoring these advisors. Now it's funny, we're on a people track here, but as a technologist, I can see how technology could actually provide some of this support, right? And it's ironic, isn't it, that we've used technology to parse the simple interactions and take them away from humans and pile on all these complex interactions on humans. Well, actually what we're going to do next is use AI to figure out, actually, I've given 3 complex interactions to this advisor already, and they're at their wit's end. Let's make sure we're giving them a simple couple of interactions afterwards, right? So we do that at scale. But also, to add to that, as we look at the sophistication of what we can provide a team leader, like the most stressful role, is that you want to be able to put your hand on somebody's shoulder in real time if they've just had an interaction or a call which has been horrific, and we could spot via speech analytics whether there were long pauses, right, which indicates there's something wrong, or they're talking over each other for a long period of time. That's flagging straight away that there's an issue, right? So by doing that, flagging that real time to a team leader, I'm sure every team leader would jump at that opportunity to be there right at the moment. Are you okay, Mike? Let's give you 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or etc. And to enhance that part as well, if you can record that interaction and then later on give that to the team and go, you know what, Mike had this very stressful interaction here, but look how he dealt with it. And that's a way that then you can show the other advisors how, oh, wow, that's fantastic. I'll take a leaf from that and learn and benefit from it. So there are all of those sort of aspects as well. I think that the final one I would have mentioned is we work with a prominent airline, a UK-based airline, who they looked at workforce planning in a very different way. So we provide an app to every person who is working in a call centre, so they can decide, they can maybe bid on shifts, they can swap shifts, they can say they're going to be late, etc., etc. But this airline decided to provide that to everybody who works in the company, ground crew, cargo, lounge staff, all of those sort of diverse roles, because they realise that if they can decide and understand their capacity planning for all those different functions, it also gives the ability for an individual to say, actually, I fancy doing something slightly different today. I'd like to go and work in cargo or the lounge and the VIP, and there's an opportunity then to make it a very diverse kind of role that they have in the company, which can only be good for the individual and the team leader and the company as a whole. You know? So just some ideas of what we're seeing as well from a technology point of view, even though it's helping people.
And Parveen, have you seen a change over the last few years in terms of your work? Are you spending more time on the people side versus process and customers? Is it more time spent with your team?
I don't know if it's a mental shift, but I know definitely that I have a duty of care to make sure that my team are okay and they feel psychologically safe whilst they're at work. I want them to speak up about their issues and you know, any problems that they're coming across, because then that gives me the opportunity to be able to take actions away and actually deliver on my promises. And I find that actually I build trust within my team if I'm doing that, and then obviously that then supports their well-being at work. And I think if I look after them, I feel that the KPIs will look after themselves.
And Kez, have you got a workforce that's split from home and in the contact centre, or are they all at home?
So it is a hybrid working environment at the moment within the team. So most of our direct voice contact is actually outsourced. We're picking up more direct digital contact, as well as providing support to those agents, and also then providing different services in terms of looking at different project improvements, etc. However, something that's really stuck with me from what you just said is, you know, that psychological safety. That's quite important, and that also creates, obviously, you know, a sense of that belonging and inclusion. Something that, you know, I am passionate about is creating that safe environment for my team to be able for them to speak up, whatever, obviously, you know, however they like to do it, you know, language and stuff like that. And I do it in 2 different type of settings. So I do it in a group setting, so they obviously build that sense of belonging and actually that, you know, teamwork, as I said to you before, you know, with this strength in numbers. And I do really believe that, you know, just actually as a collective, it is so much easier to be able to get to the end goal and objective and really, you know, thrive for those improvements or solve problems. It was mentioned on the panel earlier this morning as well that actually if you extend that communication on some of the information about the problems that you're trying to solve, or some of the projects that you're trying to improve, or some of the different improvements, implementations that you've got down on your roadmap, if you actually extend it to your agents to get that insight from them and actually ask them what they want and what they need, and you've created that really safe and open speak up culture and environment for them, it's most likely you're going to get some really, really good ideas that you'll be able to then push forward and work for. So it is really important to create that, you know, positive environment from so many different point of views, and something that I think that I would like to have as a obviously team leader as well, to be able to have that space to speak up openly, whatever, you know, channels there are, forum, create a group of people that go and, you know, seek out the voice, not from customers but from actual agents as well, the voice of an agent. So and I think that's quite important to take into consideration when, you know, putting different things into place, because in the end of the day, some of these, you know, chatbots, AIs, who are going to use it, who are going to be the people that are going to use it, and it's going to be the agents who are providing the service to the customers.
I think as an industry we are so adaptable, and it's actually been really reassuring to spend some time with you guys today, to hear what you're doing for your teams in what are trying times. But the picture isn't all gloomy from your research, Stephen, is it?
No, it isn't. There's a lot of good news. We see a lot of support being provided, particularly around financial support, because of course our financial resilience is being tested greatly at the moment, and you can't have emotional resilience if you don't have financial resilience. So we see a lot of support being provided to people on the front line. 42% of people in our survey, team leaders and advisors, said that they have received a one-off payment to help with cost of living. A similar number of people said they'd had a pay rise in the last 12 months, and there are other benefits also being made available by organisations such as information on where you can get help. So contact centres and employers are stepping up, there's no doubt, but there's also no doubt that there's a long way to go as well. I think the other area which I feel quite optimistic about, and just picking up on some of the previous comments around the role of tech, is I think we're starting to realise how tech can help. And it was interesting because you used the word punitive, Martin, and this morning there was a discussion, as there always is, about will ChatGPT take away our jobs, and that debate is never far away. Is the automation going to take away our jobs? And there's this default sense of it's a zero-sum game, but actually we need to reframe that conversation from tech being a replacement and tech as an enabler. And I think there are a number of ways in which tech can enable. So Nick and Dan have already mentioned some of those ways. On the front line, tech can enable decision support. So things like next best actions, things like better integration with CRM are going to provide better intelligence to the frontline personnel, so that actually it will take some of that cognitive load away and some of the complexity away, and they can deliver a better customer experience. That's one thing. Using some of the tools that are starting to emerge now, using some of the QA capabilities, the QA analytics, using speech analytics, conversation analytics to detect when an agent might be at a moment of stress. Some of the tools that Phoebe described in the preceding session, to be able to flag when people need support and help. And in a hybrid era, that's even more valuable than ever, because we know that it's that much harder for a team leader to know and keep tabs on how everybody is doing when they're not in the room. They're on the other side of the screen, so you can't pick up on those physical cues nearly as easily as you can when they're in the office with you. So the team leaders need help. So I'm really encouraged by the emergence of these tools that firstly can provide direct decision support in helping the people on the front line serve customers better, but secondly, those tools that work internally to help team leaders keep tabs and help proactively use the right interventions at the right time.
With all this increased awareness, so you mentioned Phoebe's session before us, and the focus on employee well-being and the culture of a contact centre are far increased, and we haven't even talked really yet about WFM and the advances there, and being able to make sure that our frontline agents, because I think one of the takeaways from when we've spoken about your research is this requirement that we've got to look after our frontline people by giving them more breaks, because we can have all of the tech and all of the awareness, but then when we start to see demand, do we go, oh, well, let's just forget it? Now, you both work at progressive companies, Parveen and Kez. Are those kind of moments protected where you make sure people have breaks, you make sure they have coaching sessions?
Yeah, so I think that for me, this year especially, I've only been in this particular job for 5 months, and I think in January I've definitely had a little bit more of an onus on coaching. Coaching needs to take place so that my team understand exactly what they're supposed to be doing. They know, processes, etc., etc. So yeah, absolutely, coaching is key.
And Kez?
For me, coaching is my kind of leading style, so I kind of naturally do it. I have heard quite a lot of the time, like you mentioned, with raising of the demands, then all of those things get forgotten about, and it kind of comes from agents' behaviour and something that's probably part of a culture, essentially, because I often hear that they're not taking breaks away from the screen, so just obviously sitting in front of the screen for 4 or 5 hours straight with no breaks at all. So some of the things that I've been doing is just giving them little reminders, also just promoting health and well-being. So sometimes when we have a morning check-in, when there isn't any burning topic to discuss or anything new that's come up, and it's always obviously kind of feel like I'm repeating myself, I just give them a little suggestions to, like, right, this time it was something that actually happened last week. It's like, this week we're all just going to take a break away from a screen during our morning meeting because there isn't any new topics to discuss. So what I'd like you to do is, if there is something in particular that you wanted to start this year for yourself, but you just didn't get around to do it yet, just go and do it. Whether it's obviously giving it a go in 10 minutes yoga, going outside, getting some fresh air, doing some gardening, or taking your dog out for a walk, or just trying 10-minute guided meditation, and then we'll have a check-in later in the afternoon and we'll talk about what we kind of share what we've given a go. And I think it is like leading by example. You kind of need to do what you say to your team for them to kind of do. So if you're saying to them, right, you need to go and make sure you take breaks, but then you are not the one that are practicing the behaviors and not leading by example, like how can you actually be successful, in what you're trying to promote and what sort of culture you're trying to build? And the fact that like we've discussed before in some of the catch-ups, it's like you need to put that oxygen mask on yourself first before on other people around you that could be struggling. So you need to look after your own health and well-being as a team leader and practice that.
May I add, actually, Martin, your question about planning. You have to have the right amount of people to do a good job anyway in the first place, right? So traditionally, you look at workforce planning, and it's a dark art, and I don't profess to be an expert, right? But there are experts out there. I think my colleague Paul Turner's out there somewhere. But the traditional model is a planner would go to a system and put in some data, and then a lot of number crunching comes out, and now you get a plan for the next month or whatever. That's really going away now, because we're going to a continuous model where AI is looking at that and pushing you any significant changes in your model based on, you might have a new business line launching. It might be a seasonal promotion. It might be something to do with the news or something that's going on in the local vicinity, which means it's going to be a change in capacity. And that's an instantaneous thing now, rather than go to it once a month and see what my scheduling is, right? So that has to change.
I just wanted to build on that with the point about shrinkage, and I think the way that we need to think about shrinkage, and maybe the ratios that we've used to historically calculate how much shrinkage that we need, may not necessarily be the right ratios for today. So if you are automating, if you are implementing and you're expecting to make savings, as you should, then perhaps you should not take all of those savings. Perhaps you should keep some of those savings back, maybe a 0.1 or a 0.2 of an FTE, and put those into shrinkage, because the shrinkage that you need in the old world of low complexity, repetitive conversations is not the same as the shrinkage that people need when they're dealing with constant, high complexity, demanding conversations. I come back to needing to take a break. So absolutely, we should be expecting to take those gains from automation, but we need to give some back to people because the job has changed.
I think our industry is dependent on our front line, not just surviving, but thriving. And all of these, the greater use of technology that's available to all now, the greater understanding of well-being, and this research, I think, is so important that we get that message that it's about breaks, that it's about making sure our frontline teams are in the right frame of mind consistently, and that the support that we're doing backs that up and helps them. And you mentioned resilience training, Dan. From a QA point of view, are you looking at, are you the early warning system as well, for maybe spotting some of the things and the signs that people are stressed, or that you might want to use the QA process to help?
Yeah, especially now where majority of our staff are work from home. You don't have the benefit of being in the room to hear that stuff. So QA definitely acts as a kind of canary in the mine in terms of, how is this agent doing? They sounded a little bit short-tempered. I might check the next call. Okay, yeah, they sound short-tempered in this one as well. So then you can provide that in the feedback to the team lead. And I think something that I really like to promote about QA, I think, is that, and what you kind of lent on earlier, Martin, is that it's not kind of like a nagging thing that I think that a lot of people see it as. It genuinely is a tool that you can use to promote progression, and I think that can really help well-being within people. I think seeing, starting at point A and finishing at point B, look, you increased by 10%. Any kind of metric observations like that, I think really gives the frontline staff a kind of little journey to go on, and provides them that progression story, which I think can have a positive effect on their well-being and their general, I guess, I don't know, in some cases self-esteem, or just a general positivity around who they are, where they're going, and something else I like to say is that this metric is it could be used if you want to go for that promotion, or if you want to at some point you're looking to apply for a job somewhere else. They might ask you, what was your average QA score, and it's all stuff like this where it's kind of we're not just saying, we're not listening to your call and saying you haven't done this, you haven't done this, you haven't done this. It's kind of it's like, this is where you could maybe improve. This is kind of the this is maybe where you can look at improving and how you're delivering some of the information that we trained you on. And I think it's I'm trying to make more of that positive light around it with whatever strings I can pull. But I think it can be really used for a positive thing in the on the floor.
Thank you. And Stephen, when's the research out, and is there anything that you wanted to share before we see if there's any questions?
It's out. We launched it about a week ago. It's a free download, ccma.org.uk. I want to thank Phoebe for being a really, really good collaborator on that research. And I guess that my parting thought before questions would be almost raising it up a couple of levels. I wonder if actually our culture and the way that we almost think philosophically about contact centers has moved on quickly enough. We know that customer expectations tend to move more quickly than our ability to meet them, so we're always catching up. Customers move faster than we do. It's all that we can do to stay up to date with what customers need and expect. I wonder if the way that we almost philosophically operate and think about contact centers as these always on, high volume, repetitive types of jobs is still accurate for today, because I think what we are looking at today in the world of what people do on the front line doesn't really look like that anymore. It is a high skill job. It is a high cognitive load job. It is a job where you need a really broad range of hard and soft skills. You need to know the organization, you need to be networked, you've got to have fantastic people skills, you've got to be good with IT, because you're probably switching between anywhere from 5 to 20 screens just in the course of answering a customer contact. You've got to be resilient. And there's so many implications to that, but I guess my sort of challenge to everybody is, are we thinking about our frontline careers? Are we marketing the careers in that way? Do our cultures reflect the reality of what the job represents today? Do we need to actually reframe and rethink what the contact center is and what life in the contact center really looks like today to represent the reality of what it is?
These two team leaders are up for the challenge. Is everyone else? Any questions?
Okay, we've got time for a couple of questions. So.
Hi everyone, great session. Thank you. My question is around culture, but within a BPO, because we all work with BPOs. So, how do we extend our culture in a BPO where maybe a cost per contact is a real driver of efficiency for them, and where it almost seems like a race to the bottom at times?
I know certainly personally my background was also in that kind of world where you were forced into being creative and feeling like you had to justify any non-productive time, even though you knew longer term it would be productive because it was investment in my people. But the beauty of my time with these guys is I feel like I've kind of got back in touch with the front line. What would you say, Parveen?
I don't know. Kaz, you go.
But Andy's from the same company, so I'm guessing he wants to get your insight from the rest of the panel.
Well,
here, right?
I think, I mean, that deserves a really long, well thought out answer. But I think one thing that's probably working in our favour is that actually it's so hard to hire people, and people have more options than ever before. So ultimately, people vote with their feet. So deliver the right culture, and people are going to want to work for you and going to want to stay with you. The opposite is also true.
And this is to change the perception, as Stephen mentioned earlier. Contact centres are not cost centres. It's customer engagement centres. And the companies that do that and invest in that properly, whether they're an outsourcer or not, are the ones that are going to succeed long term. And it's kind of trying to operate top down, bottom up. But we're getting the signs. So thank you very much for the question, and thank you very much to the panel.